Hi there, it's Ian here, and you're watching Grumpy Opinions, the show where I'm going to tell you all about what I think of films, TV shows, games, and life in general. Let's get on with the show. Westworld is the HBO TV series based on the old movie Westworld, now on its third season, telling the story about robot hosts trying to take over the world from the humans. Episode 4, The Mother of Exiles, starts off with William, the man in black, freaking out in his house and talking to his dead daughter and generally being kind of mental and wrong. Until, Hale pops up and she's like,
"Pull yourself together, man."
Because Delores is under threat from Serac and a mole and all that kind of stuff that we've all heard about before in previous episodes. And surprisingly, he's like, oh, well, that's different, I'll do something. So after he's had himself a wee shave and dressed up in his good duds, he's like, give me a minute, I need to compose my thoughts. And she's like, okay. And then his dead daughter turns up and she's like, hi dad, choice and free will. And he's like, I don't really have the time for this. So if you're in my head, then I want you to stay here in this house. And she's like, fine dad. So then he goes out. And then Hale tells him that she heard him talking to his dead daughter. And that secretly she knows all about that because she's actually Delores. And he's like, Nande! And then the two security guards grab him because it's all a ruse and they're really here to actually take him to a loony bin. And he's just proven that he's nuts. So just before they do, she's like, haha, I got you. And she scratches him with a wee needle in her finger. And then he's off to his cell, where Delores appears to him, and he asks her, am I really me? And she says, well, that's the question. That means that this is the end of the game. Meanwhile, Maeve gets woken up by Serac again, but this time in a fancy posh restaurant in Singapore, and she's all like, I'd have rather gone to Paris. And he's like, well, sorry love, Paris went kind of boomy bye-bye when I was just a wee boy. So that's why I tried to predict and steer society in good ways so that doesn't keep happening. And I need you to help stop Delores because she's the only one with the key to the data on the human minds that I need to make my machine all good and save the future. So Maeve's like, okay, fine, whatever. So they go to Bernard's place and find the identity faker who helped Delores. And then after showing him his family getting tortured, he tells them that he hooked Delores up with someone called the Mortician. So Serac gets him dead as a traitor to humanity. And then Maeve goes off and finds the Mortician in downtown Singapore, which takes a wee bit fighting, but she ends up there and convinces her to take her to the next step up the chain. And that means going to the Yakuza. And when they arrive at their base, Maeve kills her way through a whole bunch of hench guys, and then makes their guns go all kind of nuts and crazy. But then the next level's even more difficult, and she needs to make it through, but she does. And finally at the end she meets the boss, and it's Musashi from back in season 2, only it's not. Now he's Sato of the Yakuza, but actually secretly he's really Delores. He's a Delores mind put in that body. And then they have a big fight, and Maeve clearly hasn't leveled up enough because she gets totally dead. But before Delores can take out her brain pearl, Serac's troops arrive and the Yakuza have to get out there fast. Meanwhile elsewhere, Bernard and Stubbs are hanging out and they're getting a bit pissed and kind of grumping about stuff, but now they've got a plan. They're going to use their zapper to get Delores' clone, who they think is wee weedy Liam Dempsey, because they're totally way ahead of actually what's happening, and also ahead of Delores apparently. But Delores and Caleb, they're out clothes shopping, and then they go to a bank, and on the way they knock out and steal some blood from a dude and inject it into Caleb, because it's got some kind of digital marker which he can use to pretend to be him. So then they go to the bank and they withdraw all of Weedy Liam's money forever, and they use his signature that they got host Chibs to give him earlier on. And it actually goes fine, it's all alright, And after that, it all comes to a head at a great big party. And Weedy Liam meets up with his mate, the conspiracy theorist, and his girlfriend, and they're all really sad because they think that Delores died of an overdose. And it turns out that this is some kind of fancy charity prostitution party, which is a bit random. And then Caleb and Big D appear, and then Bernard and Stubbs do as well, and it's all set for a big showdown. But Team Bernard get to Liam first, and they can't turn him off, and they realise that, he's not actually a host, so they decide to kidnap him to keep him safe. And Delores heads him off, and there ends up being a big fight, and turns Stubbs getting a punch-up, and surprisingly, doesn't seem to bother any of the drugged out rich folk that are hanging around, until that is when Delores chucks Stubbs over the balcony into a bunch of people. And Bernard seems to be making it away until Caleb catches up with him, only to get surprised by Chibs, who then shoots all his own guys and holds up Bernard, and then sends Caleb off to get Liam, who ran away. And then Chibs ends up nicking Bernard's off button and tells him to get into the cab, and that's just as Caleb manages to catch up with Liam and takes him prisoner, and then Delores arrives to gloat. So what did I think? Well, I think the first 3 episodes of this season were a bit of a mixed bag in some ways. They had some janky moments and some really good stuff in between, but each of those episodes was a wee bit thin. And episode 1 maybe the least so much, but 2 and 3, I mean, they were full of fun character stuff, but they didn't move the story forward that much. But this week feels like it's a definite decision to actually get things kicked into motion. And not only that, but we've actually got most of the main players facing off in some kind of fashion. I mean, a lot of them actually in that same place at that big party. And I really liked how the show sort of set up that we thought also that all of the storylines were going to converge there, because we thought the Man in Black was heading to a big shareholder party and that was going to be the same thing. Only it pulled the rug out from under the audience with his like getting sent to the loony bin. And look, I know that I've referred to him as the Man in Black, and his name is technically William, but the young version is William, and he was known as the Man in Black in season 1. So I'm just going to stick with that. It's easier for me to make sense of all this. It's also interesting because we actually now have him in this sort of institution. So he's switched one reality for another, and it's kind of like they're trying to redo the ending of last season's post-credit scene. You know, the one where he ends up in a sort of strange future thing that didn't make a lot of sense. And unless, I mean, I assume that that is actually a flash forward to some point way in the future. So, like season 6 of the show, if it ever goes that long without getting cancelled. But even then, it felt a bit strange and it doesn't quite fit. But we'll see what happens with that. But I'll get to that later because I have other thoughts on that. But I also thought it was good to see Delores and Caleb just kind of getting on with stuff, getting things done. And the masked ball was like suitably retro futuristic and it made things feel very eyes wide shut and at the same time kind of like every other super opulent movie about excessive wealth or video game set in the future. And it was interesting that it included some world building, like stuff like how prostitution is not only legal in this future, but it's regulated and normalized. That's interesting, and it casts a slightly different moral sense on aspects of the park Westworld, particularly like Maeve and her brothel, because if it's legal in the normal world outside the park, then that means its existence inside the park is less of an outlier and less of a subversive activity. Also, speaking of Maeve, you know, I loved her little wander around New Future Singapore, which is apparently a really amazing city in real life, and probably why they filmed it there. But I also liked that it was going full Blade Runner. I mean, I can see really obvious parallels between Maeve's working her way up the food chain to find all the different people, and the story of Roy Batty in Blade Runner working his way up the chain of engineers who created him. And the scene with the mortician particularly felt an awful lot like the bit where Batty visits Dr. Chu, and I'm pretty sure that was done intentionally. And then we got some great fights with Maeve. Also, actually, the fight with Delores and Stubbs was pretty good as well. You know, that party brawl thing. That was kind of good. And I don't think Stubbs is dead. I think there's good reasons why they'll bring him back. Also, it was interesting that they actually had to like make a big point at the beginning of the episode that he was injured.
I hope you're talking about my shoulder, too. Because what little mobility I had, I lost after the little leisurely 5-mile swim we had to shore.
Because otherwise you would suspect that he would probably be able to kick Dolores' ass. So I'm glad that they actually set that up. But anyway, back to Maeve. I mean, when her ass kicking, I mean, yeah, it was really good. It was really nice to see Tandy Newton getting to do some proper fight scenes. And of course, it was absolutely epic to see Hiroyuki Sanada again. I mean, he was Musashi in season 2, and he frankly is just an amazing actor who really isn't in enough stuff. I mean, this guy's nearly 60 years old. He's got an MBE given to him by the Queen. He's performed like King Lear with the Royal Shakespeare Company, and on top of that, I mean, he's been in so many movies, and he can still rock it with a katana in a fight scene without having to have a stunt double. I mean, yeah, so needless to say, I was kind of happy when he turned up. And I was also really happy that he didn't get dead in 2 seconds because I was getting a little pissed off that Maeve was so OP in this that she could kill anyone almost instantly. Which brings me to the first things that I wasn't quite as happy with in this episode. Okay, so Maeve is still OP as hell, as we said. Now, that'd be fine at this stage, but I kind of lose interest a little bit in characters when they're ridiculously, crazily overpowered. And this is a problem I have with quite a lot of actual modern story heroes, because unkillable heroes are kind of boring, frankly. And it's one of the reasons I've never been that into Superman, or I wasn't into that Captain Marvel when it came out, because these characters were just ridiculously, insanely godlike. But in Maeve's case, suddenly every bad guy in the world is using like an auto-aim and arm brace. I mean, why? I mean, we know why. The reason that they're doing it is so that she can actually take control of it. But these are strange devices because we never saw anyone in season 1 and 2 using them, and you think that would be really handy when you're fighting against robots who are faster and more intelligent and much stronger than you. I mean, I presume the idea of them is they're like the smart guns from Aliens, you know, that actually can track an enemy using a computer, so you don't miss because it automatically turns the gun to point at them. Now, it's super convenient, as I said, because it means that Maeve can make them people like swing about and not shoot at her. But it was a bit twee that she managed to make a room full of 5 guys shoot each other, even though you can actually see they can only really turn it at most maybe 45 degrees left or right. And I'm not saying it wasn't a fun little scene, because it was, but it might help to establish exactly what these things were maybe before this scene, because as I said, the guy used it last week. Presumably, now, I mean, I infer from this now that he was shooting that paramedic through the vehicle using some kind of computer. but that really wasn't clear. I mean, it just seemed a bit strange. And it actually, in some ways, makes this less usable than a normal gun because you're really restricted in how you can move it about and use it. And similarly, Maeve is now totally adept at fighting unarmed fighting with like an opponent that has a sword or something. Okay, now maybe she downloaded some martial arts stuff, but yeah, and Sato has skills left over from the fact that Dolores nicked him from his Mushashi days or something. It's not entirely clear, but it's still incredibly convenient that these people can do whatever the plot suits them. I mean, think about it. Dolores can do all this stuff because I mean it is basically Dolores but in a different body, and she can do all this kind of stuff and be incredibly good at martial arts, and yet she still got snuck up on in episode 1. So where actually are they? I mean, right, okay. It's a bit like the show Watchmen, but first I need to talk about The Man in Black because it also ties into the same problem, the Watchmen thing. And before I say anything about Watchmen, I'll give a spoiler warning because I know it's not the show I'm talking about and I don't want to ruin it for people. But right, The Man in Black. Okay, my worry with him is that this might be the last time we actually ever see him. I mean, short of maybe like a shot later during some montage or something where maybe him crying or raging in his cell. I mean, I can see them doing that, having probably filmed it on the same day as this stuff at the end. And I really hope that isn't the case. But I also feel like the showrunners might have run out of ideas for him. And I know he's been like flailing around his house with a desert eagle, acting a bit like Thorin during his dragon sickness in the Hobbit movies. But that only squares up with one of the 2 times we saw him. Because at the end of season 2, we saw him lying unconscious at the ground on a stretcher. So presumably they got him out alive, but broken up about killing his daughter and short a few fingers because of that weird penny trick that frankly shouldn't have worked, but that's a conversation for another time. But the trouble is, the other time we saw him was in this ruined future, as I said, where he's kind of in this looping test, the same as the one that Peter Mullen was stuck in. Peter Mullen, who was playing, Delos, the actual guy who owned the company. And that idea was they were trying to make a host version of him, taking his brain and downloading it into a body, and it wasn't working. And it begs the question of whether this actually is the future, and they're maybe making an artificial version of the Man in Black, or this was a dream or nightmare he was having when he was lying unconscious. And we don't know. And that's why it's a bit like the situation from Watchmen. So, okay, spoilers for the comic, the movie, and the TV show sequel for Watchmen, all being things I haven't covered. So jump ahead to the timestamp. Spoilers coming in 3, 2, 1. So in Watchmen, there's a guy called Ozymandias. He's a super genius. He's the world's cleverest man. And when he was younger, he blew up millions of people and convinced the world that a psychic alien squid was about to invade. And that ended up stopping like a Cold War nuclear standoff that could have destroyed the world. And it united everybody in all the different countries against an imaginary common enemy. I mean, so far, so good. Okay, now if you saw the film, you're probably like, what alien giant squid? Because they used in the film Dr. Manhattan magic because it was easier to explain. But trust me, in the comic and in the TV show, it's a giant squid. The point is, he's a genius. He figures out every eventuality. He can figure out what everyone's going to do, and he's like 20 steps ahead of every single other character in the story. But in the TV show, I mean, he's still so clever that he can literally plot out a whole weird plan to escape from being imprisoned on the moon of Jupiter, using like a catapult, a makeshift spacesuit, and a few hundred dead cloned bodies. And he spends 8 years doing this, and he just potters away at it, and he knows exactly what he's doing. And also, he's so super fast and good at martial arts that he can literally catch a bullet in midair, something that happens in both the film and the TV show and the comic. I mean, they all show him doing it. And that's my problem with it. The TV show shows him doing that, but it feels like the TV show people don't like Ozymandias. I mean, presumably because he killed a few million people, and like not to mention hundreds of these innocent clone people, who literally are nice as ninepence and they'll do anything he says. But they plainly don't want to give this guy a happy ending, or they want him to see justice done by, something bad happening. And the whole point is suddenly, at the end of Out of Nowhere, 2 cops turn around he's talking to, and they say, "We're going to arrest you." And he suddenly is like, "Wait a minute, what?" And then this happens.
I saved mankind. Again. And you have the audacity to...
Yeah, see, that's the problem. Remember this guy, the guy who could do this, the guy who could catch a bullet, the guy who could catch a bullet again, who could plan a million miles ahead and predict what everyone was going to do, who was the most intelligent person in the world? Yeah, he gets blindsided by a random guy because he's so busy having a rant and raving and doing a big villain speech that he lets somebody walk up behind him and knock him over the head. And this is the same problem I'm noticing with both Dolores and the Man in Black, because Dolores is amazing and knows what's going on and can do martial arts, but then she can get snuck up on in the worst sort of video gamey way, during a cutscene when the show wants her to be knocked out, so it lets that happen. And as I said, it's a bit like last week when you just can't tell whether or not she's able to take a shot to the chest or whether or not that's going to hurt her or not, or she can just walk it off. But then in the same way, it's also trying to do the thing where it's got, well, we've got a character here we don't like, we've decided he's a villain, and we're going to make bad things happen to him. And I really feel like they want to punish the Man in Black. I mean, hell, they've been basically punishing him since the end of season 1. I mean, he gets shot multiple times, he gets hurt, he kills his own daughter. We find out his wife committed suicide. He gets half his hand blown off at the end, and now he's being haunted not only by his daughter but by the ghost of Dolores, like who seems to have somehow infected his mind. Maybe it's nanites or something. But so okay, so is this him getting his just desserts for being a bad person, a crap dad, a rubbish husband, and somebody who generally indulged in the nastiest stuff when he was in the park? I mean, okay, but it's kind of a shame because I mean it's Ed Harris and he's fantastic in this show and he was one of the most interesting characters in it. But now it's starting to become clear that they either didn't have a plan for him and the whole maze thing and that the whole showdown between him and Ford. I mean maybe that was just a bit flimsy and non-existent. I mean I really hope I'm wrong. I genuinely hope that this is not what's going to happen, and I hope that we're going to actually see Ed Harris turn up again, playing some kind of substantive part in the show, and that could happen. I could be wrong about that. So yeah, if one thing I will say is that I'm actually still enjoying the show. I might moan a wee bit about it, but ultimately it's not putting me off. It's interesting, it's exciting, it's engaging. It is a little bit dour, and a lot of the characters aren't that endearing, and that seems to be a big problem with a lot of people, watching the show, is that there's nobody actually to like in this show. But I also think it's quite nice to see a world done in this sort of just in the future, but not that far sort of way. And yeah, it's a change from all the dystopia and cyberpunk stuff or Star Trek. So, yep, totally sticking with it. Next week looks like a blast, literally. So until next time, I've been Ian, and these have been my grumpy opinions.